what was really came to the fore was the fact that it's not just, we always talk about the efficiencies and the improvements to the bottom line that digitalization can make, or sometimes we look at the other end of the spectrum. We start looking at the various different, new revenue streams that we can perhaps adapt, talking about remote services at the moment. Of course, everyone's exploring that area. But there's a lot of things that you've just touched on there, Kieran, in terms of like connecting the sales and the marketing and R&D, as well. These kind of points all start to come together, and that's something that, to be honest, it was it's something that I think perhaps I intrinsically knew, but never really had surfaced that point. I mean, let's just go through these quotes very briefly. Jason Smith, again, we've touched on some of the tools to do that, i.e. improve digitalization. Artificial intelligence, of course, one such tool, but making sure that you have the closed loop in place, and it's not just one-way traffic, is the key to that culture change. And so making sure engineers are part of it and recognize that is key to improvement. And that was a really interesting point where Jason was talking about, again, these different areas coming together. Jan van Ven, who's the founder of More Momentum, and was an excellent voice across the session as a consultant that works with a number of different companies and kind of sits across a lot of these sessions. Jan said data is absolutely important. There is no doubt about that. But the value is not in the data, and is it essentially in the insight. What we are seeing is a number of different mechanisms kicking in that are all related to digitalization. I think the real challenge is how we are going to turn it into value, not insight, but services and value propositions using the data. And I suppose for me, and Daniel, I'd like to bring you into this point as well. I suppose for me, it was number one, understanding that there's more to digitalization than the surface level conversations we have, but also perhaps we're not quite scratching the surface as well. And there's so much more that we could be doing. I know you've worked on a number of different digitalization projects, as you kind of touched on in the sessions that we worked on and in your introduction. One question I've got for you, Daniel, is, do companies tend to go into these projects when they're working with yourselves? Do they tend to go into these projects with one vision of what they're trying to achieve? Say, get a better first-time fix rate, or more hours out of the engineer, or more productivity, etc. All these metrics we usually talk about. But do they tend to come with that and then actually discover, a little bit like we saw with Eddie in the session, where he said, what we did is we utilized ServiceMax, and we got our R&D guys and our field service guys together in a room to resolve problems that they couldn't have done without digitalization. Is there a chicken and egg kind of process there, or is it just something that naturally evolves, I guess?
So it's a really interesting question, because I think getting back to the first part, right, if you think about where that actual change comes from, the drive comes from, a lot of times it'll be on some initiative that's been directed to them from the executive team that doesn't necessarily have a touch with service, right? So they'll say, look, the CFO might come back and say, service is costing us too much money. We need to reduce X and Y, and we need to make sure that we're cutting all of our costs here and there. And to do that, we need to get our first-time fix rate up to X% because it's currently at 53%. And what we find when I work with a lot of these companies is, because they're so archaic in nature, they don't have any digital tools. They may still be on a whiteboard or pen and paper out in the field, that they know they need to move the needle in one area, but as we start to discover, they have a lot of opportunities in other areas that can make a huge impact on their business as well that they haven't even considered. And as you said, I think pulling all of these different departments together to actually discuss some of that is key to understanding how they can collaborate and how they can actually enact some of those changes that we're starting to prescribe for them. One of the things that we do is we call it a maturity assessment. So we'll work with various individuals in the organization and get their take on where the service team is in across various dimensions or elements to kind of understand, as an organization, are they high or low, and where could they really move the needle? And from that, we start to identify more. And I think you see that there's a lot of really quick wins for organizations to change and do things that are not hard for them in that digital transformation, and that that can really move the needle for them as an organization and free up more opportunity to make more of those changes into the future.